Imagine standing in front of the world, your heart laid bare, knowing that every gaze is fixed on you. The love you've kept secret, the truth you've hidden for so long, finally exposed in an instant. And in that moment, when everything you feared comes crashing down, the one person who believes in you, the one person who never doubted you, steps forward and declares his love in front of an entire room. This is the story of Claire Hart, a woman whose quiet kindness and humility were overshadowed by a world that misunderstood her. But when the man she loved, Ethan Cole, stood beside her defending her against the lies and the cruelty of the world, it was more than just a love story. It became a battle for truth, for resilience, and for a love so pure it couldn't be broken. Will their love survive the storms ahead, or will the world tear them apart before they can find peace? Stay with us to discover how two hearts bound by trust and compassion fight against everything that stands in their way. This is a love story unlike any other. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to begin this unforgettable journey. Let us dive into the heart of the story, now. The breeze that drifted through Camden City that October night carried the first hint of winter. Inside the radiant halls of the Elmswood Grand Hotel, laughter and clinking glasses echoed beneath towering chandeliers. The city's most lavish charity gala had begun, where status was currency and kindness often wore a mask. Under the golden glow, silk-covered tables bloomed with roses and candlelight. Gentle classical music swirled through the air, performed by a quartet tucked into a quiet corner. Around the room, conversations sparkled, not with sincerity, but with calculated charm. Stepping into this glittering world was a woman of 31, with calm eyes and a quiet grace. Though born into the influential Bennett family, Claire had spent most of her life away from the noise of wealth and social games. Her heart belonged to her small nonprofit, not the spotlight. Tonight, however, wasn't about comfort. She had come to ensure that the cause she quietly funded, a children's shelter in the outskirts of the city, wasn't being used for empty show. Claire wore a sky-colored dress she had sewn by hand, soft fabric that swayed gently as she walked. Her hair flowed naturally, and a single silver bracelet rested on her wrist, once belonging to the woman who had raised her with love, not riches. But in this room of sequined gowns and diamond smiles, Claire stood out for all the wrong reasons. Not 5 minutes after her arrival, a group of women near the champagne table glanced her way. Their voices were light but sharp. "Is that homemade?" one asked, feigning innocence. "Maybe she is one of the organizers," another replied with a smirk, though even they usually dress better. Their laughter was soft, practiced like blades wrapped in lace. Claire heard it all. She didn't flinch, but her fingers curled gently around the fabric at her side. She had been through this before in boarding schools, in boardrooms, the sneers, the eyes that judged before listening. Still, something about this night made the silence inside her feel heavier. She turned away and walked toward the edge of the room, where auction items gleamed behind velvet ropes. But she wasn't looking at the paintings or the prizes. Her thoughts wandered to the shelter, to the children who lit up at the sight of a new book or a warm meal. That was why she had come, not to be seen. But to see Claire had grown up with whispers behind her back. The cruel ones always found a way in at the orphanage, at school, even at business dinners, where she sat silently beside board members who had no idea she funded their missions. She had learned to endure them, to smile politely through assumptions. But tonight, in this golden ballroom of silk and smirks, something pierced deeper than usual. As she quietly stepped farther into the room, trying to escape the growing noise, more voices trailed her, like unwelcome shadows. So inappropriate. One woman muttered, her neck glittering with a necklace that looked like it cost more than an apartment. Honestly, did she mistake this for a church raffle? Another chimed in her words, dipped in honeyed cruelty. Claire lowered her eyes. Not because she agreed, but because the weight of pretending not to hear had grown too heavy. She blinked, willing the sting in her eyes to fade, but the ache wasn't it from shame. It was that old familiar loneliness, the kind that visited when the world reminded her she didn't quite fit in, no matter what her last name or bank balance said. She found herself drifting toward the far end of the room where auction displays sparkled under spotlight. Framed artwork designer bags, diamond-encrusted keepsakes, luxuries that seemed so far removed from the world she actually cared about. Her gaze moved over them, but her thoughts wandered to the children back at the shelter, to the boy who had hugged a new winter coat like it was treasure, or the girl who wept silently over a bedtime story. This was why she was here. Not to pose, not to prove, but to protect what mattered. Across the room, leaning against a marble column with quiet detachment, stood Julian Ward, 36-year-old CEO of Ward Tech Systems, and a name that made headlines more often for his acquisitions than his appearances. He was dressed in a midnight black suit, holding a glass of wine like it bored him. His dark hair was immaculately styled, and his expression unreadable. In circles like these, Julian was both feared and admired. Cold, decisive, untouched by sentiment. He didn't care for events like this, but for the sake of reputation, he showed up always on time, always alone. That night, however, something pulled his gaze away from the swirling dancers and champagne flutes. A woman standing near the auction table alone, hands gently clenched at her sides. Her dress one couture, her presence one polished. But her eyes, they held something real, something startling in its softness. He heard the laughter too, the careless words thrown behind her back. He saw how her head lowered slightly, how she pressed her palm against the fabric of her handmade dress as if trying to hold herself together. Julian wasn't used to feeling anything at these events, but now a quiet discomfort stirred beneath his ribs. It wasn't at pity, it was recognition. She didn't belong here, and somehow neither did he. He took a slow sip of wine, eyes never leaving her. A decision settled in his chest, firm, quiet, absolute. Claire had no idea the man watching her from across the ballroom was about to shift the course of her night, and perhaps her entire life. She didn't know yet that before the night ended, someone would reach for her hand, not out of pity, but with purpose, and pull her gently out of the silence, straight into the heart of the room she had tried to disappear into. Claire stood near the edge of the ballroom, partly hidden behind one of the tall display tables. Her gaze, quiet and distant, drifted across the sea of glittering gowns and polished laughter. But she wasn't truly watching them, she was listening. The voices still echoed behind her, each word like a tiny shard of glass. What is she even wearing? Did someone let the help in by mistake? That dress is practically stitched by candlelight. Their laughter danced like wind chimes in a cold breeze, beautiful from afar, cruel up close. Claire lowered her head, fingers trembling as they clung to the edge of her dress. She had braved many rooms like this before, but something about tonight felt different. It wasn't the dress or the stairs. It was the feeling that no matter how much she gave, this world would never see her as enough. Across the ballroom, Julian Ward had just ended a hollow conversation with a financier he barely tolerated. As the man walked away, Julian turned to leave too. These galas exhausted him all, sparkle no soul. But then he saw her. A woman standing apart from the crowd, her posture small, but still holding a kind of quiet strength, and her eyes, when he caught the barest glimpse, weren't a hollow like the others. They were full of something deeper, something like truth. He paused. She didn't see him, not yet. She was too busy holding herself together. But he saw everything, the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her fingers tightened around the hem of her handmade gown, the way she was trying not to be seen and yet desperately wishing someone would see her. Julian's grip on his wine glass tightened. A strange heaviness settled in his chest. He was a man known for his control, for staying detached, but tonight something in her presence pulled at him, and so without another thought he set his glass aside and began to walk. The crowd, sensing the shift in energy, moved instinctively. Whispers followed him. Some watched with amusement, others with curiosity. After all, Julian Ward, the man who never lingered, was heading straight across the room toward a woman no one seemed to know. Claire didn't notice him until his shoes stopped just inches from hers, polished dark, quietly commanding. She looked up and froze. Standing before her was the most powerful man in the room. But his eyes, dark and steady, held no arrogance, only a gentle focus. He leaned in slightly, not to tower, but to speak softly, as though they were the only two people in the world. "May I have this dance?" he asked. His voice was low, calm, one hand extended open. Waiting. Claire stared, stunned. The music faded into a hush. Her heart stammered beneath her ribs. She looked at his hand, then at his face, impossibly composed, effortlessly, handsome. But it was his eyes that unraveled her. They didn't judge, they didn't question, they simply waited. I don't really know how to dance," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes wide with hesitation. A faint, unexpected smile appeared on Julian's lips, not the polite kind he wore for clients, but something gentler, something warm. "That's perfectly fine," he said softly, as if there was no one else in the world. "I'll lead." Before she could protest, he gently took her hand. His grip was steady, his touch calm, like an anchor in a storm. She let him guide her almost without thinking. As they stepped toward the center of the room, a hush seemed to fall over the crowd. Conversations faded, glasses paused midair, heads turned. Julian Ward, the man who never danced, never lingered, never looked twice at anyone, had just asked the quiet woman in the homemade sky-blue dress for a dance, and she had said yes. The very women who had mocked Claire now stood frozen in place, eyes wide, their champagne trembling in their hands. Across the ballroom, whispers moved like ripples on still water. "Is that Julian Ward?" a man murmured, barely hiding his shock. "Who is she?" another woman asked, envy lacing every word. But the music began again, a soft waltz, delicate and slow, and the noise faded. Julian placed one hand lightly at Claire's waist, his other holding hers with quiet assurance. They began to move slowly. At first she was stiff, uncertain, her movements hesitant, but he didn't rush her. He matched her rhythm, guiding her with patience that felt almost reverent. Every step he took was careful, as though the dance itself was sacred, and slowly Claire began to breathe. Her limbs softened, her heart settled, and for the first time that night, she let go. Her eyes met his, truly met his, and what she saw wasn't a power or distance. It was presence. "You all right?" he asked gently, his voice low beneath the swell of the music. "I am not used to this," she admitted, her cheeks tinged pink. Julian gave the smallest nod, his gaze kind. "Then just follow me." She stumbled once and again. He didn't flinch. He adjusted. He waited. And they kept moving, not perfectly, but together. As if the world had shrunk down to the space between their two hands, Claire began to feel it, the warmth spreading from where his fingers held hers. It moved through her like sunlight, melting the ache she had carried since stepping into this room. In that moment, she didn't feel like an outsider anymore. She felt seen. She felt safe. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Whispers still came, bitter and biting. How did she get him to dance? She's nothing. This has to be a joke. But Julian didn't hear them. Or if he did, he simply didn't care. His attention never left Claire. Not once. As the final note of the waltz drifted into silence, Julian slowed their steps. Then, without breaking eye contact, he bowed slightly and lifted her hand. He pressed the lightest kiss to the back of it, a gesture so sincere it silenced even the cruelest whisper. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for dancing with me." Polite applause broke out across the ballroom. Some clapped because they were expected to. Others did it simply because they didn't know what else to do. But underneath the sound was something quieter, astonishment. Still amid the rising noise, Claire could hear the faint sting of whispers, jealous, sharp, and cold. She lowered her gaze, her cheeks flushed. She didn't know where to look or what to do with the storm of feelings surging inside her, part gratitude, part confusion, part disbelief. Julian must have sensed it. With a gentle hand on her shoulder, he guided her off the dance floor. No words. Just a steady presence beside her like a promise unspoken. Claire's heart was racing not from embarrassment, but from the realization that something had just shifted. She didn't know what this was or what it meant. Only that the moment he reached for her hand, something inside her had changed. In the center of the ballroom, the waltz still floated like mist in the air. The chandeliers shimmered above their light, cascading over Claire's handmade dress like moonlight on water. But for the first time that night, she didn't feel out of place. It wasn't the music that made her feel that way, or the grandeur. It was his hand still holding hers and the quiet steadiness in his eyes. She had stumbled through the dance, nervous, unsure, afraid of being watched. Her feet weren't trained for rhythm, her legs had trembled more than once. She even stepped on his shoe. I am sorry, she had whispered, barely louder than breath. But Julian hadn't winced. He had smiled just softly and gently squeezed her hand. You were doing just fine, he said, his voice low like the hum of something kind. And slowly, something inside her began to settle. The tension in her shoulders eased. Her steps found rhythm. Not perfect, but real. Julian moved with her as if he had done it all before. Not just the dance, but the part where he made someone feel safe in their own skin. But the truth was, he rarely danced. He hated being in the spotlight. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, he had danced for her. He adjusted his steps to match hers. Moved slower. More gently. Not to impress, but to be present. To make sure she didn't feel invisible again. Claire looked up at him. Really looked. And what she saw in his gaze wasn't judgment or curiosity or even admiration. It was care. She didn't feel like the girl in the wrong room anymore. She felt seen. What caught her off guard most wasn't how he looked, though there was something undeniably striking about him under the light. It was the way he looked at her, as if she mattered, as if she was enough. Julian, meanwhile, couldn't look away. There was something about this woman, her quiet strength, the gentle way she carried herself, the way she didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. In a world full of masks, she was a rare glimpse of something honest. He bent slightly toward her, his voice barely louder than the music. Did you come alone? Claire offered a faint smile, soft and slightly distant. I came to support the cause, she said quietly, her tone calm but guarded, giving just enough to answer yet not enough to invite more. Julian tilted his head, studying her with subtle curiosity. He had met hundreds of people at events like this, most of them eager, polished, and transparent in their intentions. But this woman, she didn't try to charm him, she didn't even seem to want his attention, which strangely only made him want to know her more. You are not like the others? He murmured, a trace of amusement threading through his voice. You're not trying to prove anything. Claire let out a soft laugh, lowering her eyes to the floor. There was a flicker of light in them, like the last gleam of sunlight before dusk. Proving something doesn't make it true, she replied gently. I prefer things that don't need to be performed. Her words struck him, simple but real and rare. Julian was used to being impressed by design, by performance, by ambition masked as charm, but this woman didn't impress him. She disarmed him. No grandeur, no pretense, just quiet presence. She was the kind of truth he didn't know he had been searching for. You are interesting. He said this time more softly, more sincerely. What is your name? Claire looked up at him. Their eyes met her calm blue against his steady brown. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she smiled again, a smile that felt like it carried a memory no one else could touch. Claire, she finally said, voice smooth, like falling snow. Just Claire. Julian sensed she was hiding something not out of deception but protection, a quiet boundary, and he didn't push, because somehow the mystery didn't matter. What mattered was how she made the noise around him fade. As they kept moving gently across the floor, he felt something unfamiliar stir in him. Not attraction, not curiosity, something quieter, deeper. He admired the way she held herself like someone who had been through storms and chosen not to harden. She didn't play the game everyone else did. She simply existed in it honestly. And Claire, though she barely understood it, felt something shift within her too. Julian's warmth, his restraint, the way he met her where she was, it wrapped around her like a moment of stillness she hadn't known she needed. She didn't know who he was, didn't know he ran a tech empire, that his name alone could shift entire rooms. All she saw was a man whose gaze held no expectation, only interest. As the music neared its end, Julian spun her gently, his hand firm at her waist, steadying her when she faltered. Claire let out a soft laugh, her first of the night, like the breath after a long silence. He looked at her, something playful flickering in his expression. "You dance better than you think." Claire flushed, shaking her head. "No," she said with a light grin. "You're just very good at pretending I do." Julian chuckled, a quiet, genuine sound that made something flutter in her chest. "I think you are wonderful," he said, his voice low and deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers. As the final notes of the waltz melted into the air, Julian dipped his head and pressed a soft kiss to the back of her hand. Not because it was expected, but because it felt right. "Thank you for the dance." "Claire." Julian whispered, his voice low and sincere. The moment his words left his lips, the ballroom erupted into applause. Some clapped out of courtesy. Others, though, were genuinely astonished. Claire's cheeks flushed with a deep crimson, her gaze dropping to the floor as she felt the weight of everyone's attention. She wasn't used to being the center of anything, especially not in a moment like this. What came next? She wasn't sure. Sensing her discomfort, Julian placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, guiding her away from the floor. His eyes held a silent promise that this was far from the end. And Claire, still overwhelmed by the unexpectedness of it all, had no idea that this dance, this brief moment, had just opened a new chapter in her life. What she didn't realize as she was led off the floor was that the most powerful man in the room, the man who had taken her hand so publicly, had already become captivated by something far deeper than she had revealed, something hidden beneath the surface, her sincerity, her quiet strength, a secret that even he couldn't yet foresee. The morning after the grand charity gala at the Elmswood Grand Hotel, the sky above Camden City was unusually clear. Soft sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a warm golden glow over the quiet suburban streets. Amidst the calm stood Sunshine Haven, a humble orphanage tucked between rows of small houses. The walls, once a bright yellow, had faded with time, but the cheerful laughter of children still echoed through the small playground. A tiny garden in the back, where the children grew their own vegetables, provided a slice of peace that echoed the simplicity of life here. This was where Claire's Hart truly belonged. Not the glittering galas, not the false smiles, but moments like these when she could be herself and give back to children who needed her most. That Saturday morning, just like every other, Claire arrived early wearing a simple white shirt, faded jeans, and an old pair of sneakers. Her brown hair was loosely tied in a bun with a few strands blowing in the breeze. In her hands, she carried a small bucket filled with seeds and gardening tools ready for the children as planting activity. "Miss Claire." "What are we planting today?" A young girl no older than 7 with black hair neatly braided ran up to her, her eyes wide with excitement. Claire smiled warmly, brushing a strand of the girl's hair behind her ear. "Today we replanting zucchini," she said, her voice soft and inviting. Would you like to help? The girl nodded eagerly, pulling Claire towards the garden where the sound of laughter and excited chatter filled the air. It was the kind of warmth Claire treasured, simple, genuine, and free of pretense. Meanwhile, Julian Ward, still grappling with the memory of the dance and the way Claire had made him feel, was driving through the quiet suburban streets, his sharp brown eyes gazing thoughtfully out the window. Since the night before, he hadn't been able to shake the image of her, the girl in the simple blue dress with gentle eyes that seemed to hold a depth he couldn't quite place. Julian was no stranger to attention, but this was different. There was something about Claire, something pure, something real that lingered with him like a melody he couldn't forget. He hadn't planned on being here that morning. A brief escape from the chaos of city life had led him to this quiet, unfamiliar place. His assistant had sent him a reminder one of Cole Enterprises' sponsored charities was hosting an event at a local orphanage. They had requested his presence. Normally, Julian would have sent a donation and stayed far from the spotlight. But today, something felt different. Something pushed him to go. As he pulled up to Sunshine Haven, Julian parked his car and adjusted the collar of his shirt. He scanned the surroundings with a sharp, calculating gaze, but as he heard the laughter of children, his focus shifted. It pulled him almost like a magnet. He walked toward the sound, and then as he rounded the corner of the building, he stopped in his tracks. There she was, Claire. Her laughter mingled with the children's, her smile lighting up the space around her. For a moment it felt as though time itself had paused, leaving only the soft sounds of the wind and the joy of a child's day. And for the first time in a long time, Julian didn't feel the weight of the world around him. There, kneeling in the dirt among the children, was Claire. Not the Claire from the Gala in a silk dress, not the polished woman of influence he had met the night before, but a completely different Claire. She wore a simple white shirt, faded jeans, her hands dusty from working alongside the children planting vegetables in the small garden. Her face was smudged with dirt, her hair loose and windswept, yet her smile, radiant genuine, was brighter than any crystal chandelier Julian had seen at the gala. "Miss Claire, I did it." A young boy no older than 5 cried out, holding up a newly planted sprout with pride. Claire laughed, ruffling his hair. "Good job, Tommy. Now let's water it together, okay?" Julian stood frozen, unable to tear his eyes away. He watched as Claire, not as the figure of high society he had seen in the ballroom, but as someone grounded, warm, and real, kneeled beside the children. She picked up a picture book and began reading aloud, her voice full of warmth and patience, carrying a gentleness that seemed to wrap around everything she touched. "Miss Claire, where did the bunny go?" a little girl asked, pointing at a colorful illustration in the book. Claire smiled and replied, "He went to find new friends just like you, found your friends here, and we re-friends too, aren't we?" The girl nodded enthusiastically, throwing her arms around Claire. Laughter echoed across the garden. Something inside Julian stirred a mixture of surprise, admiration, and something else he couldn't to quite name. He had met countless people in the world of wealth and status, people who loved to boast about their charity work, but few who genuinely lifted a finger. Claire wasn't here for the photos, for the accolades, or for the recognition. She was here because she truly cared. Julian stepped closer, careful not to interrupt the scene unfolding before him. But one of the boys spotted him and shouted, "Miss Claire there, as a handsome man coming." Claire looked up and her wide blue eyes widened in shock when she saw Julian standing at the edge of the garden. She scrambled to her feet, brushing dirt from her jeans, her face flushing red with embarrassment. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice small, her eyes glistening with a mix of surprise and something else Julian couldn't place. Julian smiled softly, his brown eyes locking with hers. "I am here to check on a charity project my company sponsors," he said, his voice low and sincere. "But I didn't expect to run into you here." Claire. Claire nodded, her gaze shifting slightly, as if she was still guarding some part of herself. "Yes, I come here often to help," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "The kids here need a lot of support." Julian studied her, a spark of amusement flickering in his eyes. I can see that he said, his tone laced with gentle teasing. "But I must admit," he continued, "I didn't expect the girl who danced the waltz at the plaza to also know how to garden and teach children." Claire blushed, lowering her head slightly to hide a small smile. "I'm not very good at waltzing," she said, her voice light but confident. "You saw that." She chuckled softly. "But I am good with kids. They make me feel real." Her words caught Julian off guard. He was used to women trying to impress him with glittering jewelry, grand gowns, and polished conversations. But Claire didn't try to impress him. She didn't posture or flaunt anything. And it was that very authenticity, that grounded honesty, that pulled him in. In a world of artifice, he thought to himself, Claire is real. He sat down beside her, his gaze following the laughter of the children as they played and worked in the garden. "You're making me rethink a lot of things," Julian said, his voice deep and thoughtful. "I used to think wealth was about power, money, fame, but seeing you here, it feels like wealth means something else entirely." Claire turned toward him, her blue eyes sparkling with genuine surprise. "True wealth isn't about what you have," she said gently, her voice carrying a depth of wisdom. "It's about what you give." A quiet moment passed as Julian took in her words. Claire wasn't speaking of grand gestures or material riches, but something deeper, more lasting. Her words hung in the air between them, and for the first time in a long while, he found himself reflecting on his own life. "I don't need fame or fortune to feel valuable." Claire continued, her gaze lifting to the children around her. "I just need to see smiles like these." Her words struck Julian with unexpected force. He had always equated wealth with success, with power. But Claire, she made him question everything. She wasn't seeking validation or attention, but rather she found value in simplicity and connection. That was something rare, something extraordinary. For a long moment, Julian remained silent, lost in thought. Then slowly, he rose to his feet, his brown eyes never leaving hers. "You're a very special person, Claire," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I hope we meet again." Claire smiled, warmth radiating from her as her blue eyes met his. "I hope so too," she replied softly, but her words were clear. Unbeknownst to her, this unexpected meeting, whether by fate or mere coincidence, was opening a brand new chapter in her life. A chapter where the most powerful man she had ever met would soon become the most important person in her world. A week after the charity gala at the Elmswood Grand Hotel and her surprising encounter at Sunshine Haven, Claire Hart received another invitation. This time it was for a charity auction at the Waldorf Astoria, an even grander venue. The invitation came with a handwritten note that read, "We look forward to the presence of the young woman who inspired so many at the last gala." Claire read the line over and over, her blue eyes shimmering with a mix of surprise and concern. She wasn't sure what awaited her at this event, but after a moment of thought, she decided to attend. Not because she enjoyed these glamorous occasions, but because she knew the proceeds would go to support orphanages, including Sunshine Haven. That night, Claire entered the grand ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria, and once again the familiar feeling of not quite belonging swept over her. The hall was lavishly decorated with fresh flowers hanging from the ceiling, golden candlelight reflecting off crystal glasses, and the soft notes of jazz played by a live band filling the air. She wore a cream-colored silk dress, another handmade creation with simple, elegant lines. Her brown hair was loosely tied back, and on her wrist was the old silver bracelet, a keepsake from her adoptive mother that she always carried with her. Despite her efforts to prepare herself for the evening, the scrutinizing glances from the crowd made her feel uneasy. She noticed some familiar faces from the last gala, the same women who had mocked her before. Now they whispered among themselves, their eyes sharp with disdain as they looked her up and down. Claire tried to find a quiet corner, hoping to avoid further attention. But just then, the host of the evening, a middle-aged man with an exuberant voice, stepped onto the stage, drawing everyone's eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed into the microphone, excitement glinting in his eyes. "We are about to begin the most special auction of the evening." He paused, grinning widely. "Tonight's prize is a date with a mystery beauty from our last gala, the young woman who captivated us all and danced with none other than Lucas Ethan Cole himself. Please welcome Miss Claire Hart to the stage." The entire ballroom erupted into applause mixed with gasps and murmurs of curiosity. Claire froze, her blue eyes widening in shock. Her face flushed bright red with embarrassment. She had no idea about this auction. No one had told her she would be part of it. "I didn't," she stammered, her voice trailing off. Before Claire could even protest, an event staff member gently guided her toward the stage. The bright lights hit her immediately, and she felt exposed as though the entire room was now watching her every move. She stood frozen, clutching the hem of her dress tightly, her heart pounding wildly. The host continued, his voice brimming with excitement, as though this were just another part of the show. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your chance to win a date with the enchanting Miss Claire Hart, the woman who captured Mr. Cole's attention." He boomed, "We'll start the bidding at $10,000. Claire's eyes widened in shock, panic flashing through her as she heard the words, "date with her." This wasn't how she imagined the evening unfolding. She wasn't some object to be bought and sold. But before she could react, a middle-aged man in a sharp suit raised his hand. $20,000, he said smugly. Another man, younger, and clearly enjoying the spectacle, quickly followed, raising his bid $30,000. The crowd erupted into cheers and claps. But to Claire, every raised bid felt like a knife twisting deeper into her chest. She stood there, trapped, her heart heavy, as she felt herself being reduced to nothing more than a prize to be fought over. $50,000, shouted another man, his voice thick with self-satisfaction, as his friends laughed behind him. The laughter echoed in Claire's ears, cutting through her. She lowered her head, her vision blurring as unshed tears threatened to spill. Still, she refused to cry. She wouldn't let them see her break. The situation grew increasingly uncomfortable. The men bidding weren't interested in her. They were just competing to see who could win her. From the sidelines, the same blonde woman who had mocked her at the last gala sneered and laughed loudly. "Look at her," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Probably thinks she's a special now. Who would even want to date her anyway?" Their laughter cut through Claire like a blade, making her heart feel like it was being crushed under the weight of their judgment. She wanted to run, to disappear into the shadows, but her legs felt like lead frozen in place. And then through the noise, a deep voice rang out from the back of the room, slicing through the murmurs and laughter like a blade. $500,000. The entire room fell silent, the air sucked out as if someone had pressed pause on the world. All eyes turned toward the source of the voice. It was Lucas Ethan Cole, standing tall and commanding in his perfectly tailored black suit. His sharp brown eyes scanned the crowd, never wavering, never showing any hesitation. The host fumbled with his words, clearly stunned. $500,000 from Mr. Ethan Cole. "Is there anyone willing to bid higher?" he asked, but no one moved. No one dared challenge the most powerful man in the room. Before the host could declare the auction closed, Ethan began walking toward the stage, his steps firm, deliberate. He stopped in front of Claire, his deep brown eyes locking onto hers before turning to face the crowd. His voice rang out low and firm, but cutting through the tension like a thunderclap. "She's not an item for sale." A ripple of shocked whispers echoed through the room. No one dared to challenge him. No one even moved. Ethan turned back to Claire, his gaze softening, becoming almost tender. "I didn't bid to buy you," he said, his voice. "Just for her. I bid so. No one else could hurt you." Claire stood frozen, her wide blue eyes filled with a storm of emotions she couldn't quite name. Her cheeks flushed with the intensity of the moment, her heart hammering in her chest, not from shame, not from embarrassment, but from something new, something unfamiliar. For the first time in her life, Claire felt truly protected, truly valued, not for wealth or status, but for who she was. Ethan's unexpected gesture, his quiet fierceness, his sincerity sent a tremor through her heart. Claire looked at him, her blue eyes glistening with unshed tears, not tears of sadness, but of something deeper, something stirring inside her that she had never felt before. Ethan extended his hand, his brown eyes filled with gentle warmth. "Would you like to leave here?" he asked, his voice low and tender. Claire hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. Her small hand slipped into his, and he grasped it firmly, leading her off the stage. They walked through the stunned crowd, past envious stares and renewed whispers. But Claire no longer cared. All she felt was the warmth of his hand around hers and a deep, unfamiliar sense of safety. They stepped into the quiet hallway of the Waldorf Astoria, where the soft golden lights cast a peaceful glow over them, a stark contrast to the noise and the pretense of the ballroom behind them. Ethan turned to her, his brown eyes dark and steady. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Claire nodded, her blue eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you." She whispered, her voice small but steady. I don't even know what to say. But thank you for what you did." Ethan smiled slightly, never taking his eyes off her. "You don't have to thank me," he said gently. "I just did what felt right." Claire looked up at him, her blue eyes sparkling with an emotion she hadn't dared to feel before she didn't know it yet. But this moment was opening a brand new chapter of her life. What she didn't know was that the most powerful man in the ballroom, the man who had just defended her before the entire world, was slowly becoming the most important person in her heart. After leaving the stage at the charity auction, Claire Hart and Lucas Ethan Cole stepped into the quiet hallway of the hotel. The soft golden lights created a warm, peaceful atmosphere, a stark contrast to the noisy, pretentious ballroom behind them. Ethan still held Claire's hand, his touch steady and reassuring, like a silent promise that she no longer had to face judgmental stares or cruel whispers. Alone, Claire lowered her head, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of emotions, her heart still pounding from Ethan's unexpected action. How he had protected her, boldly declaring that she was not something to be bought or sold. Ethan guided her toward a secluded corner of the hallway, where a long velvet bench sat by a large window overlooking the sparkling streets of New York. The city glittered under the night sky, but in this small, quiet space, there was only the presence of two people, connected by something deeper than words. Ethan released her hand, his deep brown eyes gentle as he asked, "Are you sure you are all right? I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Claire looked up, her blue eyes shimmering with gratitude, yet tinged with lingering worry. I am fine," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. I didn't expect you to do that." "Thank you, really." Ethan smiled softly, sitting down on the bench and gesturing for her to join him. "I couldn't just stand there and watch them treat you like that," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You didn't deserve to be turned into some kind of spectacle." Claire sat down beside him, her hands nervously clasped together in her lap, her blue eyes cast downward, deep in thought. She wasn't used to being protected. She wasn't used to anyone standing up for her the way Ethan had. In her world, a world where she had always chosen to live simply and quietly, give. She was used to facing challenges alone, but tonight, for the first time, her heart trembled at the kindness of a man she barely knew. Ethan watched her closely, his brown eyes tracing the delicate lines of her face, his expression softening. The world outside felt distant now, as if nothing mattered, but the quiet space they shared, the unspoken connection that was growing stronger between them. Ethan watched Claire, closely noticing the guardedness in her eyes, the way she held back, protecting parts of herself she wasn't ready to share. He had been drawn to her the night of the gala at the Elmswood Grand Hotel, and their unexpected reunion at Sunshine Haven had only deepened his curiosity. There was something hidden behind her gentle eyes, something he couldn't yet reach. "You don't have to tell me anything if you are not ready," he said, his voice low and understanding. "But I'd like to know you better, Claire. Who are you really?" Claire lifted her head, her blue eyes locking with his, and in that moment she felt the sincerity radiating from him, a quiet strength, a tenderness that made her feel safe. She offered him a small, gentle smile, one that hinted at vulnerability, as though she wasn't ready to reveal everything, but maybe a part of it. "I'm just an ordinary person," she said quietly. But clearly, "I like simple things, helping children at orphanages, volunteering at charity events. There's nothing special about me." Ethan frowned slightly, his curiosity sharpening in his brown eyes. "You are not ordinary?" he said, his voice firm and steady. "I've met hundreds of people in my life, and none of them are like you. You have a heart. I don't even know how to explain it, but I can feel it." Claire blushed faintly, her blue eyes flickering downward, but she didn't shy away. She took a deep breath, as if weighing a decision, and finally chose to share a piece of her story. "I used to be an orphan." She began, her voice soft but unwavering. Her eyes grew distant as old memories stirred. "I grew up in an orphanage outside New York. No parents, no family, just other kids like me. Life wasn't easy. We often didn't have enough to eat or wear, and I was teased a lot for my old clothes and broken shoes, but I never hated my life." She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "I always believed that no matter how hard things got, there was still good in the world worth hoping for." Ethan listened intently, his brown eyes never leaving her face. His heart stirred with something unfamiliar, a deep, aching respect. He had heard countless tales of wealth and power from the elite circles he moved in. But Claire's story was different. It was raw, real, and it pulled at him in ways he couldn't quite explain. "When I was 12, a woman came to the orphanage." Claire continued, her voice growing softer, filled with emotion. "She was different from anyone I'd ever met, kind, generous, and full of heart. She adopted me, brought me home, and gave me a family I never thought I'd have." She paused again, a wistful smile crossing her face as she spoke of the woman who had shaped her life. "She taught me that the greatest wealth isn't money or fame, but kindness." Claire said, her eyes shimmering. "She said if I can make even one person's life better, then that will be the most valuable thing I could ever do." Claire's smile faded slightly as she remembered the woman who had changed everything for her, but she didn't share everything with Ethan. Not yet. She didn't tell him that the woman who adopted her had been a billionaire, the matriarch of Hart Industries, who had passed away a few years ago, leaving Claire a vast fortune. She had chosen to hide her true identity, not because she didn't trust Ethan, but because she wanted him to see her as she was, not as an heiress, not as someone with a fortune, just a girl with a heart determined to do good. "I decided to live my life giving back." Claire continued, her voice gaining strength. "To help others the way she helped me. I don't need recognition. I just want to do the right thing. Whether it is helping kids at an orphanage or making sure charity money actually reaches the people who need it." Ethan sat silently, absorbing every word Claire spoke, his heart long frozen by years of ruthless business dealings and fake smiles began to thaw with each syllable. He had lived in a world of facades and hidden agendas, had learned to protect himself, to distrust, and to never let anyone close. But Claire was different. Her story, her sincerity, her unwavering kindness, everything about her chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. "You are truly special, Claire," Ethan said finally, his voice thick with emotion. His brown eyes shone with respect, a rare softness taking over his usual hardened gaze. Ivy met hundreds of people, but no one has ever made me rethink what truly matters. Until you. Claire looked up, her blue eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and quiet joy. I am not special, she said softly. I am just doing what feels right. Ethan smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened his entire face. No, he said, his voice deep and firm. You are special. You have a heart I've never seen in anyone else, and I want to know more about you if you'll let me. Claire blushed again, but she didn't look away. Instead, she offered him a soft, meaningful smile, one that hinted at the possibility of trust, of something more. She didn't know it yet, but sharing her story had just opened a new chapter in their relationship, nor did she realize that the most powerful man from the gala, the one sitting beside her now, was slowly but surely being captivated by her hidden heart, a heart unlike anything he had ever encountered in his world. After the charity auction at the Waldorf Astoria, the budding relationship between Claire Hart and Lucas Ethan Cole quickly became the hottest topic among New York's elite. Images of Ethan holding Claire's hand, leading her protectively off the stage, flooded tabloids and social media, accompanied by sensational headlines like "Billionaire Ethan Cole defends mystery girl at charity auction" and "Unknown beauty captures the heart of CEO Lucas Ethan Cole." But what stirred the public more than Ethan's unexpected action was the mystery surrounding Claire Hart, the simple girl in a self-made dress who had managed to draw the attention of one of the most powerful men in the city. The financial world buzzed with relentless gossip. At cocktail parties in exclusive clubs and behind the closed doors of corporate boardrooms, Claire's name was spoken with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Who does she think she is, stepping into our world? Sneered a middle-aged investor, one who had once bid during the auction. She's probably just another gold digger. A woman who had openly mocked Claire at the previous gala added bitterly, Ethan Cole's just playing around. He couldn't possibly be serious about a nobody like her. The rumors and whispers spread rapidly from opulent soirees to cheap tabloids, casting Claire into an unwanted spotlight, but not in a way she had ever sought. Ethan, as CEO of Cole Enterprises, was no stranger to media scrutiny and business rivalries. He had learned to navigate the constant attention with indifference. But this time, it was different, because Claire was dragged into it too. He hadn't anticipated that his sincere attempt to protect her would make her a target for public cruelty. What angered him more, however, was the reaction from his own family. The Cole family, an old money dynasty, with ties to some of the most powerful circles, expressed their disapproval loudly when they learned Ethan had publicly shown affection for Claire. At a family dinner at the Cole estate, the tension was palpable. In the grand mansion on the Upper East Side, Ethan's mother, Margaret Cole, a sharp-eyed, silver-haired woman with a commanding presence, did not hold back. "What do you think you're doing, Ethan?" she demanded, her voice icy as she set her wine glass down hard against the table. "Who is that girl you dared to hold hands with in front of the entire elite? Do you realize the damage you're doing to our family's reputation?" Ethan, sitting across from his mother, met her gaze without flinching. He had heard this tone before, the one that cut through everything, leaving no room for debate. "Her name is Claire Hart," he said, his voice low but resolute. "And I don't care about the family's reputation, I care about her Margaret's." Frown deepened her eyes, glinting with disapproval. "Don't be naive, Ethan," she snapped. "She's a nobody. No background, no connections, nothing to offer a family like ours. You need someone who matches our standing, someone who strengthens Cole Enterprises, not a common girl who spends her time playing charity games." Under the table, Ethan's hand clenched into a fist, his brown eyes darkening with silent anger. He was used to his family's controlling ways, but this time something inside him refused to bend. His mother had long planned for him to marry into another wealthy dynasty, someone who would elevate their status, but this time he couldn't comply. "She is not a common girl," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. She has a heart. You'll never understand. And I won, to let this family decide who I can or cannot love. Margaret sat back in her chair, her lips tightening into a thin line. She said nothing more, but Ethan knew this wasn't the end of it. His family would not give up easily. They would never accept Claire, not as long as their values were rooted in wealth and social standing. Meanwhile, the pressure from the press on Claire grew mercilessly. After the auction, tabloids began digging into her life, twisting whatever details they could find. Headlines like, "Gold Digger, Claire Hart, the common girl who snagged billionaire Ethan Cole and Claire Hart. Angel of charity or social climber," were splattered across gossip sites, painting her as a manipulator, a woman who had used Ethan to climb the social ladder. They photographed her leaving Sunshine Haven Orphanage, shopping at the local farmer's market, and even sitting alone on a park bench, her blue eyes lost in thought. Articles speculated that she was a schemer, capitalizing on Ethan's wealth and influence. The truth that Claire had never even revealed her real identity or her connection to Hart Industries was ignored. Reading those headlines on her phone, Claire's blue eyes dimmed with sadness, but she didn't cry. She didn't issue statements or try to defend herself. Instead, she chose silence. She knew who she was, and she refused to seek validation from people who didn't truly see her, rather than let the criticism break her. Claire immersed herself in what mattered most, her work at Sunshine Haven. She spent her days planting gardens with the children, reading them stories, cooking meals, proving her worth through actions, not words. It was in those moments that she felt truly alive, where the judgments of the world seemed distant and unimportant. One afternoon at the orphanage, Claire was kneeling in the dirt, with the children helping them plant a new row of carrots, when she heard a familiar, deep voice behind her. "Can I help?" Ethan asked. Claire looked up, her blue eyes wide with surprise. But when their gazes met, her expression softened, and a gentle smile spread across her face. A smile so warm it made Ethan's heart hammer in his chest. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Her voice small but clear, the surprise still twinkling in her eyes. Ethan crouched beside her, never taking his eyes off her, his presence filling the space between them in a way that made the world outside fade. "I am here to help," he said simply. "I came to see you." Ethan said simply, "I read the articles, and I know they've been cruel. I am sorry, Claire. I never meant for my actions to bring this down on you." Claire shook her head, a soft sadness crossing her face, though her smile remained. "It's not your fault," she said, her voice calm. "I'm used to cruel words. I don't care what they think, as long as I know I am doing the right thing." Ethan looked at her, his brown eyes full of admiration and something deeper, something that went beyond the surface. "You were unlike anyone I've ever known," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They call you a gold digger, but I know you are not. You have a heart unlike anything I've ever seen in my world." Claire's blue eyes shimmered, not from sorrow, but from gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered. "But you don't have to protect me, Ethan. I can take care of myself." Ethan shook his head slowly, his gaze steady and sure. "I know you can," he said softly. "But I want to be by your side, Claire. Not because of fame or money, but because I care about you. Truly." Claire lifted her eyes to meet his, and in that moment she saw nothing but honesty reflected in them. Her heart skipped a beat, a strange, thrilling sensation rising inside her. She didn't say anything, only smiled, a quiet, luminous smile that said more than words ever could. She didn't yet know that the prejudice and trials they now faced were only the beginning of a much longer journey. Nor did she realize that the powerful man who stood beside her, the one who had once seemed so distant, would soon become the most important person in her life, and that even greater challenges awaited them both. 2 weeks after the malicious criticism from the press and the mounting pressure from his family, Claire Hart continued her volunteer work at Sunshine Haven Orphanage, as if the gossip and whispers had no effect on her. But deep down, the loneliness and pressure gnawed at her. She never spoke of it, not even to Ethan, about the sleepless nights spent reading articles that called her a gold digger, or the judgmental stares that followed her every time she stepped outside. Claire chose silence. Yet in her heart, she couldn't deny that she was hoping for something, for a sign that she wasn't truly alone. Meanwhile, Ethan Cole couldn't stand to watch Claire be treated unfairly for another second. He had read the articles, heard the vicious rumors in financial circles, and faced fierce opposition from his own family. But instead of backing down under pressure, he decided to act. He organized a grand charity gala at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, an event that gathered the press billionaires and the most powerful figures of New York society. Ethan's goal was just to raise money for charitable foundations. He wanted to do something more. He wanted to place Claire in the light, to show everyone who she truly was, and to prove that she was not the gold digger they had painted her to be. That night, the Ritz-Carlton ballroom glittered under the golden glow of massive crystal chandeliers. The marble floors gleamed beneath the reflections of clinking champagne glasses. Claire stepped into the ballroom wearing a simple yet elegant white silk dress she had made herself. Her brown hair fell in natural waves, and around her wrist was the old silver bracelet she always wore, a keepsake from her adoptive mother. She had no idea what Ethan had planned, only that his message had been simple. "I want you here. Claire, trust me." Claire lingered quietly near the edge of the room, her heart beating faster with each passing moment, though she couldn't yet bring herself to look around at the faces she had come to dread. She had always shied away from the spotlight, never wanting to be the subject of attention, but tonight she felt different. Ethan had shown her a side of life. She had never imagined one that was full of possibilities, but also fraught with challenges. Her gaze searched the room, but it didn't take long before she felt his presence beside her. Ethan stood tall, his dark eyes catching hers across the crowded space, his gaze warm, unwavering, and full of quiet understanding. He had brought her here not to show her off, but to see her, to let the world see her for who she truly was. Claire stood at the edge of the ballroom, her blue eyes scanning the crowd. She recognized many familiar faces, the same ones who had sneered and whispered behind her back. Now, a few journalists were snapping pictures from afar, their cameras capturing every moment. She lowered her head, clutching the edge of her dress, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of their gaze pressed down on her, but then the stage lights flared, blinding her for a moment. Ethan stepped onto the stage, tall and commanding, in a perfectly tailored black suit. His presence filled the room, sweeping over the crowd with his sharp brown eyes radiating a cold, undeniable confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his deep voice echoing through the microphone, capturing every gaze in the room. "Tonight, we are gathered here to raise funds for those who need it most. But before we begin, I want to introduce someone very special, someone who has changed the way I see kindness and the true meaning of value." A murmur of curiosity spread across the room. All eyes locked on him, eager to hear more. Ethan turned, his brown eyes softening as they found Claire, and he extended his hand toward her. "Claire Hart, would you join me up here?" Claire froze, her blue eyes wide in astonishment. Her cheeks flooded with color. For a brief moment she hesitated, but the gentle encouragement in Ethan's eyes gave her the courage to move. She stepped onto the stage, her legs trembling slightly under the weight of 1,000 stares. As she reached him, Ethan took her hand in his, warm, firm, and reassuring. He turned to the audience, his brown eyes burning with conviction. "I want to introduce to you Claire Hart," he said, his deep voice resonating across the room. "The most beautiful heart I have ever met." The room erupted into murmurs of surprise, gasps and whispers of awe. Some eyes were filled with admiration, others dripping with envy, but Ethan continued, his voice steady, filled with emotion. "She is not the ordinary girl the media has portrayed her to be. She is someone who has dedicated her life to helping others, bringing joy to orphaned children, and proving that compassion is the greatest wealth a person can possess. Claire stood frozen, her blue eyes shimmering with tears, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude and emotion. She never expected Ethan to do this, to introduce her to the world as someone precious, someone worthy. She bowed her head slightly, her cheeks flushed, her heart pounding wildly. She wasn't used to attention. She wasn't used to being honored before a crowd, but the sincerity in Ethan's voice wrapped around her like a warm blanket, soothing her nerves. Ethan turned to her, his brown eyes softening even more. He tightened his grip on her hand, pulling her closer, and before the stunned crowd, he looked directly into her eyes and said in a deep, unwavering voice, "Claire, I love you." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. People stared frozen in shock, but Ethan didn't waver. His brown eyes remained locked on her, his voice low and filled with raw emotion. "I love you regardless of the rumors, regardless of wealth or family expectations. You are the most important person in my life, and I want the whole world to know it." Claire stared at him stunned, her blue eyes wide with disbelief, her breath caught in her throat. Ethan. This powerful, untouchable man had just confessed his love for her in front of the entire New York elite. Claire's heart hammered not from fear or embarrassment, but from something far deeper, far stronger. It was an overwhelming feeling she had never experienced before, one that filled her chest with warmth and a strange, thrilling sense of belonging. She looked up at Ethan, her blue eyes shimmering with tears. In that moment, everything else, the whispers, the flashing cameras, the gossip disappeared. There was only Ethan. Only the sincerity in his gaze, only the warmth in his touch. The room exploded into applause, mixed with murmurs of shock and envy. The photographer's flashes went off like fireworks, capturing every second of the moment. But Claire didn't care. She saw only Ethan, the man who stood before her, declaring to the world that she mattered. Ethan smiled, never letting go of her hand. His brown eyes glowed with a promise, one that she could feel deep in her soul. He would always stand by her no matter what storms awaited them. After Ethan's public declaration of love at the Ritz-Carlton charity gala, his relationship with Claire Hart became the center of attention across New York's high society and media. What had begun as a beautiful moment of solidarity and love soon turned into a fierce battleground for their hearts. But the brilliance of that moment didn't last long. A dark financial conspiracy from a rival corporation soon surfaced, threatening to destroy everything Ethan and Claire had built together. Just days after the gala, a series of explosive news articles flooded the media, accusing Ethan of financial fraud and embezzlement through the very charitable funds that Cole Enterprises supported. Headlines screamed, "Ethan Cole exploits charity to cover. Financial crimes and Cole Enterprises faces its greatest scandal yet." Worse still, fabricated evidence emerged, suggesting that Claire was a spy planted to sabotage Ethan's reputation, branding her as a traitor intent on toppling Cole. Enterprise's public opinion turned vicious. Social media exploded with malicious comments. "I knew it. She is just another gold digger. Ethan Cole was a fool to let a woman like that manipulate him." The board of directors at Cole Enterprises, already displeased with Ethan's romance with a common girl, immediately pressured him to resign. An internal investigation was launched. Stocks plummeted. The man, once seen as an unshakable titan, now found himself under relentless attack from all sides. In his office at Cole Enterprises headquarters, Ethan sat alone, his brown eyes dark with tension. He crushed a newspaper in his hand, the headline blaring, "Claire Hart Traitor," or "Billionaire's Lover Fury," and helplessness battled within him. He refused to believe Claire was a traitor. Not for one second, he remembered her gentle smile at Sunshine Haven, the way she knelt in the dirt to plant vegetables with the children, the sincerity that lit up her blue eyes when she spoke of her past. No, Ethan whispered fiercely to himself. She is not a traitor. But despite his belief, the pressure mounted. Paparazzi hounded Claire relentlessly, snapping photos of her every time she left the orphanage, twisting her image into that of a scheming social climber. Though Claire was no stranger to cruel words, this storm was different. It was bigger. It was merciless. She didn't want Ethan to be dragged down because of her. One evening from her modest apartment in Brooklyn, Claire called him. Her voice was small but resolute. "Ethan, we should end this," she said quietly, her words heavy with emotion. "I don't want you to be hurt because of me." At his office, Ethan closed his eyes, pain flashing across his face as he listened to her words. The weight of the world seemed to press down on him, but he knew what he had to do. "Claire Donty," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to let this tear us apart. I don't care what they say." Ethan replied, his deep voice raw with emotion. "I believe in you. I am not letting them tear us apart." But Claire shook her head, even though he couldn't see it. Her blue eyes shimmered with tears. "I won. To let you lose everything because of me," she whispered. "I'll step away, but I won. To let them win." Before he could say anything else, she ended the call. Silently, she set a plan into motion. She would fight back. She would uncover the truth behind the accusations. Meanwhile, the pressure on Ethan grew unbearable. The board convened an emergency meeting demanding that he resign to protect the company's reputation. Rival corporations, especially the long-standing enemy Marshall Group, poured more fake evidence into the media, intensifying the storm. But still, Ethan stood firm. He never doubted Claire. He trusted the heart he had seen in her, the goodness in her gaze, the kindness in her soul. At a board meeting facing the directors, Ethan S. Brown, eyes burned with quiet defiance. "I will not resign," he said, his voice unwavering, "and I will prove these accusations false." Determined to fight, Ethan arranged a massive press conference at the Four Seasons Hotel. The ballroom was packed with reporters, flashes from cameras firing non-stop. The tension in the air was suffocating. Ethan stepped onto the stage clad in a perfectly tailored black suit. He looked exhausted but unbowed. His deep voice carried across the hushed room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to address the accusations against myself and Cole Enterprises. I did not commit fraud. I did not misuse charitable funds." And regarding Claire Hart, he paused, pain flickering across his brown eyes as he spoke her name. "She is not a spy. She is the woman I love, and I will not allow anyone to tarnish her." But before Ethan could continue, the heavy ballroom doors swung open with a dramatic crash. Everyone turned. Claire entered. She no longer wore a simple handmade dress. Tonight, she wore a sleek, powerful black suit. Her brown hair was swept up into a graceful bun. Her blue eyes blazed with strength and determination. She crossed the room with every step sure and purposeful, climbing the stage to stand beside Ethan. A gasp rippled through the room. Reporters scrambled for their cameras. The flashes exploded like fireworks. Claire took the microphone from Ethan's hand, her voice small but clear, slicing through the noise. "My name is Claire Hart, chairwoman of the Hart Foundation, one of the largest philanthropic dynasties in the world." An explosion of shock roared through the crowd, cheering applause, flashing lights. The media instantly went wild. Within minutes, headlines blazed across the internet. Claire Hart, from unknown beauty to billionaire heiress. The secret behind the charity queen, a hidden fortune. Revealed articles follow Claire Hart, once branded. A gold digger is revealed to be the heiress of Hart Industries, worth billions. The simple girl who had captured Ethan Cole's heart turned out to be the powerful leader of a global charitable empire. Ethan stood, frozen, stunned. He stared at her, his heart pounding wildly. Claire, the girl he had met in a self-made dress, the girl who knelt in the dirt to plant seeds with orphans, the girl he loved for her honesty and kindness. She was the heir to an empire. Claire stood, the weight of the moment settling around her. She was now revealed as the leader of one of the world's most powerful philanthropic empires. But the shock lasted only a second. Pride swelled in Ethan's chest. He wasn't proud of her fortune. He was proud of her heart, the humility with which she had lived, the selflessness she had shown. Claire faced the reporters, her blue eyes steady. "I am not a spy," she said, her voice firm. "And I never approached Ethan Cole for fame or fortune. I am here to expose the truth." She held up a thick file of documents. "This is evidence proving that the Marshall Group fabricated the allegations against Ethan Cole and Cole Enterprises. They manipulated the media, falsified documents, and orchestrated a campaign to destroy him for their own gain." Claire presented emails, financial records, and recordings, all irrefutable proof. The ballroom erupted with cheers and applause. Flashes blazed brighter as reporters captured every second Marshall Group's lies were laid bare. Public opinion, once hostile, swung sharply in Ethan's favor. Marshall Group, now exposed, became the new target of outrage. New headlines flooded in Claire Hart exposes. Marshall Group, conspiracy, hidden heiress. Defends her love and clears. Cole Enterprises. Name. Ethan turned to Claire, his brown eyes shimmering. Not with shock anymore, but with overwhelming pride. He stepped forward, wrapped her tightly in his arms. Before the whole world. "I don't care who you are," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you for your heart, Claire, and I am so proud of you." Claire smiled through her tears, her blue eyes glowing. "I was never a spy," she whispered back. "I was always just the woman who loves you." The room exploded into thunderous applause. Cameras flashed relentlessly. But in that moment, Claire and Ethan saw no one but each other. Their love, true, tested, and unbreakable, shone brighter than any scandal ever could. The press conference at the Four Seasons Hotel ended in an uproar of media frenzy and public shock. Claire Hart, the woman once labeled a gold digger, had revealed her true identity: chairwoman of the Hart Foundation, heiress to one of the world's largest philanthropic empires, and the force that exposed Marshall Group's conspiracy, saving Ethan Cole's reputation and that of Cole Enterprises. The media erupted with headlines like "Claire Hart, from simple girl to billionaire philanthropist and hidden heiress crushes, conspiracy defends Ethan Cole." Public opinion swiftly turned Cole Enterprises' stock soared. Marshall Group faced a wave of backlash. Yet amid the flashes and cheers, Claire and Ethan saw only each other, their blue and brown eyes locking in a silent promise of a love that had endured everything. They left the stage and wandered into a quiet corridor of the hotel, where the soft golden lights above created a peaceful, intimate space, a stark contrast to the chaos they left behind. Ethan held Claire's hand tightly, his warmth grounding her. His brown eyes shone with pride and adoration. "You are truly extraordinary, Claire," he whispered, his deep voice thick with emotion. I never imagined you were the chairwoman of the Hart Foundation, but I'm proud of you for your humility, for your heart." Claire lowered her gaze, her cheeks flushing pink. She was still adjusting to the overwhelming feelings of validation and pride, but she knew deep down that she was no longer the girl they once believed her to be. She was someone who had fought for what was right, who had stood by the man she loved despite the world's judgment. And in Ethan's eyes, she had seen the love that transcended all obstacles, a love that was as real and enduring as the legacy they were now building together. Ethan squeezed her hand, his voice soft but steady. "Claire, there is something I need to tell you." He smiled, his brown eyes gentle, filled with warmth. "I'm always ready to listen," he said. Taking a deep breath, Claire looked into his eyes, her blue eyes shimmering with emotion. "I haven't been completely honest about my past," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I told you, I was adopted by a woman who taught me about kindness, but I didn't tell you the full truth. That woman was Eleanor Hart, a billionaire philanthropist, founder of the Hart Foundation," Claire continued. "When she passed away, She left me her entire fortune, including Hart Industries, a massive empire I never intended to inherit. Ethan froze a flicker of surprise in his gaze, but he stayed silent, giving her space to continue. Claire pressed on her voice, now breaking as the weight of her secret left her. "I am sorry I didn't tell you sooner," she said, her voice trembling. "It wasn't because I didn't trust you. I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for a name or wealth. I was scared that if you knew you'd look at me differently, but after everything we've been through, I can't hide anymore." Tears welled in her eyes, and she bowed her head in regret. "I am sorry, Ethan." Truly, without hesitation. Ethan lifted her chin, his brown eyes tender. "Claire," he murmured, his voice soft and reassuring, "I don't care about your fortune or your family's legacy. I love you for your heart, for your compassion, for your laughter with the children. I love you for being you, and nothing could ever change that." He smiled warmly, his brown eyes glowing with sincerity. "You have nothing to apologize for. If anything, I am even prouder of you for choosing a life of humility when you could have chosen luxury." Claire's lips trembled into a radiant smile, her blue eyes brimming with tears of happiness. She squeezed his hand tightly. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. "Thank you for always believing in me." Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "Thank you," he murmured, "for walking into my life." In that quiet moment, every misunderstanding melted away, and their love grew deeper, stronger. The weight of the world seemed to lift, leaving only the two of them bound by trust, love, and the promise of a future together. 3 months later, on a crisp winter evening, Claire and Ethan hosted a small celebration at Sunshine Haven Orphanage, the place where their hearts had first truly found one another. The playground was decorated with strands of warm golden fairy lights, creating a sparkling canopy overhead. Wooden tables were laden with cookies, hot cocoa, and fresh flowers. The children ran around laughing, their joyous voices filling the crisp air. It wasn't an extravagant gala. It was something infinitely more precious. A night of love, laughter, and simple joy. A night where both Claire and Ethan felt they truly belonged. Claire wore a simple white silk dress. Her brown hair flowed freely, adorned with a handmade floral crown, lovingly gifted by the children. She stood in the center of the garden, her blue eyes glowing as she watched the little ones play. Her soft smile warmed Ethan's heart like nothing else could. Ethan, standing a few feet away, couldn't take his eyes off her. Wearing a white rolled-up shirt and black trousers, he looked relaxed, yet effortlessly powerful. Watching her surrounded by the children, he knew this was the moment. The perfect moment. Ethan walked toward her, his brown eyes luminous under the golden lights. The children gasped and squealed in excitement as he dropped to one knee in front of her. Claire froze, her blue eyes wide with wonder. Ethan pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Ethan opened the small velvet box. Inside was a simple yet elegant silver ring set with a delicate blue gemstone, the exact shade of Claire's eyes, Claire Hart. He began, his deep voice filled with emotion. "You've taught me that true love doesn't need fame or fortune, that trust can endure any storm, that compassion is the greatest treasure a person can offer." He took a breath, his voice trembling slightly. "I can promise you the whole world, but I can promise you my world, my heart, my loyalty, my life. Will you marry me?" Claire stood motionless, tears streaming down her face, not from sorrow, but from overwhelming joy. The children cheered and clapped, some dancing around them in excitement. Laughing through her tears, Claire bent down and whispered, "Yes, Ethan, 1,000 times yes." Ethan rose to his feet, slipped the ring onto her finger, and swept her into a tight embrace as the garden erupted in celebration. The children ran up, hugging them both, their innocent laughter wrapping around the couple like a blessing. Their love story had become a symbol not just of romance but of resilience and truth. They were proof that true love transcends wealth and status, that trust can survive the fiercest storms, and that kindness will always outshine cruelty. And under the golden lights of that little garden, surrounded by the laughter of the children they loved, Ethan and Claire stood hand in hand, hearts forever intertwined. Their love became more than just a story. It became a legend, a reminder that when love is pure, when trust is unbreakable, and when compassion leads the way, no challenge is too great. And that true happiness, the kind that lasts a lifetime, is often found in the simplest, most genuine moments. And so Claire and Ethan's love story continues a testament to the power of trust, kindness, and unwavering commitment. Through the darkest storms and the brightest moments, their hearts remain intertwined, proving that true love is never about wealth or status, but about the strength of the heart and the courage to stand together no matter the odds. Their journey reminds us all that sometimes the simplest acts of love are the most profound, and that even when the world doubts us, love can still shine through. Thank you for joining us in this beautiful story of love, resilience, and truth. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that will move you and remind you of the beauty of human connection. Until next time, remember, true love never fades and it is always worth fighting for.